I think you might have. Here, I can move over. Nope, it's all good.
Well, was somebody sitting?
No, I'm.
How about over there?
Oh, you can be right here. But you're not the chair of the meeting. I'm not chair of the meeting. I just feel like I'm sitting here. Who's chair of the meeting? That was my house.
Oh, are you sitting here?
No, Jane is sitting here.
Oh, no,
You have a baby.
Okay.
Then maybe Jerry should have different too.
Right direction.
Yes.
To the table.
Where are you?
I'm for you.
Esme.
Moving left.
Get
over, right? Is that fine? You can sit. Hi, Paris. Hi. No, we met.
But if you want to sit here, now this is great.
I just moved
Okay.
Becca's.
All right.
Okay. Anyone else looking for a seat? We got one here. Oh, we're coming to sit down. Awesome. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of the Climate Solutions Caucus. We are also live streaming and recording this, so just know that. Yeah. I am Senator Becca White, if you don't know me, and I am so honored to be the co-chair of this caucus for the second term. And if you didn't already know, Representative Molly Burke is our co-chair. So she's new as our co-chair. So let's give Molly a round of applause. And on our leadership team is Scott Campbell, Phil Pouch, and Kate Logan. So if you have any follow-ups from the meeting, feedback, suggestions, come find that lovely group of people. We have a lot of advocates in the room, folks who are on the train with us, going to the station of fighting climate change. I would introduce all of you, but there's so many of you. So if you're an advocate in this space and you're willing to help legislators out, could you raise your hand? Oh, it's great.
What's up, yo?
They have many. They're all amazing. So if you have a topic area that you are hoping to develop a bill on, or there's an issue that relates to climate change, there's probably somebody who raised their hand who would like to help you with that or has information to help you. Today, we're going to do a pretty quick agenda because I want to get you guys out of here by 12:55. But we are very lucky because we're going to start out with our climate office, and the director, Jane, is here with us today. And she's going to give us a brief overview of what that office does, who can we go to, and hopefully tell us a bit about the staff. And then when she's done, we're going to hear from Jared Duval, who in his role as a climate counselor is just going to tell us a bit more about the frame of reference for where we're going with climate change in 2025. And then we're going to open it up briefly for questions and then hopefully get you out of here. Is there anything?
No, just Jane Lazorchak, right?
Oh, yes.
Just wanted to say the full name. And great that everybody's here.
Yeah, and thank you both for agreeing to co-chair again this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, I know sometimes people can't come to the meetings. And so just, you can watch the on video. And also, or if you want to let us know about something that you heard about and whatever, you know, just communicate. And we know that people can't always come. So we know, but we are going to try to get a list together today. And that will be for purposes of, say, writing a letter to the administration or to the speaker or pro tem or whatever. And we'll have to, you know, have a situation where if you agree to be part of the climate caucus, we would run a letter by you before sending it out. But hopefully, you know, everybody could just say from the climate caucus and put names on. But for some reasons, we know that some people might need to bow out of a certain particular letter. Yeah. And that's okay because we understand different regional differences and challenges.
Yeah. So thanks for taking your lunchtime to do this. I'd pass it off to you if you'd like to give us an intro. If folks haven't met you, take it away.
Thanks so much, Senator White and Representative Burke. Jane Lazorchak, work at the Agency of Natural Resources. I've been there for almost 20 years and had the privilege of stepping in to the Secretary's office during the development of the initial climate action plan to support the Climate Council and the development of that plan, and then with an eye to hoping to support and develop the climate work both within the Agency of Natural Resources and then externally to coordinate and amplify that good work happening in agencies and departments across government. So first, I'm going to start with an apology to House Energy members, since many of you heard the same presentation yesterday, but it's really nice to see so many people here interested in this issue. And hopefully every time I present it, I probably put a different spin on it. So maybe you'll learn something.
Totally different than we're
Totally different. Yeah. So the Climate Action Office sits in the Secretary's Office of the Agency of Natural Resources. That office was a recommendation that came out of the initial Climate Action Plan as a place to coordinate, amplify work across government, not to lead all of climate action in state government, but really to acknowledge the work that was happening and be able to provide a platform, a voice to speak to that work in a coordinated fashion, as well as support distinct needs, programs, et cetera. It was stood up in the fiscal year 23 budget from the governor and the legislature. And so we're a relatively new, right? We're trying to figure out what that work means outside of sort of coordination, leading, what is our unique role that we can play. And we have distinct responsibilities around the Global Warming Solutions Act, which I'll get to today, but not, and leave you with at the end. And it'll be a nice transition over to Jared to speak about the role of the Climate Council. But we also are focused on really thinking about how we lead, coordinate, and track climate action beyond just what the Climate Council is doing and our support for that work. It's really complementary to the recommendations that come out of the Climate Action Plan and in support of, but our charge is not to advance solely the climate action. I want to lead by saying that we, as we put forward the Climate Action Office, we thought a lot about where in government it should sit. As I've said, climate action is happening in every sector of government. We're thinking about it in how it affects human health, the mental health, physical health of Vermonters. We're thinking about it from our energy transition to transportation. And so while it made sense to put it in A&R because of our specific obligations under the Global Warming Solutions Act, we wanted to lead and start right out of the gate with standing up an interagency advisory board to really bring forward the expertise and make sure we were not sort of duplicating or stepping on the work happening in other spaces. So the agencies on the right, Public Service Department, Agency of Transportation, A&R, Vermont Emergency Management, Ag, Buildings and General Services, Agency of Human Services, Agency of Commerce and Community Development, Department of Labor, all have secretaries or commissioners or their delegates sit on an interagency advisory board that meets quarterly to handle and advance the objectives you see here on the slide. We came together really closely to coordinate and take advantage of grant opportunities through the Inflation Reduction Act. We put together an annual climate spending document that seeks to pull out all of the new funding being dedicated to climate across the state government so that we can tell a compelling story of where the work is, where there's funding cliffs, where there's new funding needed. And we coordinate closely also with the state climatologists. For folks who don't know Leslie Ann Dupini-Giroux, she is afforded that title through her role with NOAA. That also gives her the distinct title of being the Vermont State Climate Office, hence why we're the Climate Action Office. And we were working really closely on developing an MOU with her to think about her role in coordinating data and research on climate at universities and directly tying that with action. So where are implementers, people who are driving climate outcomes through budgets, needing to answer real questions about what the data needs are and the research to make sure it's tied to reality of what the drivers are in the state. So Leslie Ann sits with us on the Interagency Advisory Board. She also sits on the Climate Council, and she really provides a nice sort of link to like outside of state government and an overarching view of that. So just to dial a little deeper before I introduce the staff, we have a unique experience that we've built an office. We're staff of 8, which is really great. When the Global Warming Solutions Act was passed, the Secretary's office was afforded 3 positions to implement the GWSA, a director, a coordinator, and then legal capacity. We hired 2 of those positions, myself and Marion Woles, to drive forward the Climate Council work in that first year, but never acted on hiring that legal capacity and rather spread that work out across legal counsel that was already in A&R. But through the development of the climate office, we actually were able to build a more robust staff out to accomplish what we see as sort of the three pillars of climate action: reducing emissions, mitigation work, investing in natural and working lands around resilient measures, as well as sequestration and storage, and then thinking about resilience and adaptation in our built environment. How do we invest in our communities so they're more resilient and can withstand the impacts of climate change? So we've built that expertise and capacity. We also see a pillar of our office in thinking about how we track and assess climate actions and communicate those findings. I'll pause midway through my presentation to make sure we have time to give you a few examples of our work before transitioning to Mr. Duval, but I will just say that one of the things we're leading right now is the development of a measuring and assessing progress tool, which is intended to work sort of hand in hand with the greenhouse gas inventory, which the greenhouse gas inventory is the legal backstop to the GWSA, but we also know that there's need to track the strategies and measures that we're putting on the ground, the more fine-grained policy levers to know if they're yielding results and where we're missing sort of the boat on those things. And we also want to think about metrics for thinking about resilience and adaptation. So yes, it's important to cut our emissions, but we can hear consistently from Vermonters about the need to invest in building resilience and adaptation in the face of all of the impacts that we've had over the last few summers, as well as warming winters, et cetera. And a pillar of our office has also been the understanding and expectation that we are asking a lot of Vermonters. We're asking a lot of municipalities to face climate change and implement measures, and that those are only going to be as successful as they are co-created with Vermonters. So we've invested in community engagement and communication staff to both talk about messaging for climate change, but also hear from folks and think about creative strategies closely with our environmental justice unit, thinking about how we support Vermonters to show up and speak with us about the ideas, their impacts, and what they see as meaningful action. So I lead the Climate Action Office. Again, it's under the Secretary's office that we work closely with the Planning Office, with the Environmental Justice Office. There's been a sort of a vamping up of staff within the Secretary's office in A&R to think about how we sort of leverage and coordinate within our own agency and then externally. We have two positions for mitigation, a section lead that is currently in recruitment for folks who work closely with Megan O'Toole. She used to lead that work for our office. It's been hard to recruit that position. It's our second time going out right now, but we have a suite of candidates and are hopeful that by February of this year, we'll have selected a candidate for that. We've been able to keep pace because of the excellent capacity we have through Brian Woods, who really has a lot of expertise in modeling and economic development for our office and handles all of that, is the expert around thermal efficiency as well. Sophie Veltrop leads our community engagement and communications work. Marion Walls leads resilience and adaptation in the built environment. And then Evan Horn, we entitled him the Resilient Lands Coordinator, but he really works on natural and working land solutions, which has been exciting for us to sort of have a focus in thinking about the role our agency plays in coordinating conservation work, forest resilience, and then working closely with the Ag Agency on how we can lift up practices and measures that they're doing. The Climate Planning Administrator is a new position that we were afforded through our award of the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants, which is a pot of money through the Inflation Reduction Act. Liz Amler is working really closely to stand up the processes and administration for this next climate action plan and the Climate Council. I feel very grateful that she's here. That work is nothing short of behemoth when you're trying to write a new plan. And then we're currently recruiting a new climate change progress analyst who handles our greenhouse gas inventory and will handle the measuring and assessing progress tool. We've been fortunate not to sort of lose pace with developing our greenhouse gas inventory because we know how critical that is with respect to the GWSA. We have a temporary position who's continuing that work, who was actually the original greenhouse gas inventory person for DEC in 2007 to 2015. So we brought him back just to do the greenhouse gas inventory and to have that expertise and capacity to train the next person. So I have 3 or 4 examples of work, but I also want to be mindful of time. If you'd like me to go through a few examples, I'm happy to, but also happy to pause and transition.
You have till 12:35. You were like, so you've like time. Six, but can
Okay.
can I just ask one question before you move from your staff?
Mhm.
What is and I mean this genuinely, I do not know the answer to this question. What is the level of appropriateness for a legislature to reach out to one of your staff? Is it okay for us to say, hey, I've got a specific question that seems like it's under lands or conservation. Can I reach out to that gentleman? What is your best point of contact that you would recommend to this group?
We have a very detailed process within our own agency of how we deal with requests from the legislature. So
Okay.
you're welcome to reach out directly to staff, and they know the protocol like in-house to determine if they're the right person to answer it or how to direct it up through the chains. You can also always go to Emma, who's the assistant to the secretary, and she'll help direct you to the right staff.
Thank you. But it is appropriate. Like if we've got questions or we hear from constituents, that would be cool.
Yes.
Okay, that's very helpful because we get a lot of our constituents reaching out to us about these questions, and it's very helpful to have a go-to source. So thank you.
And may I just ask one more, which is, are we going to make these slides available to the caucus?
Yeah,
I bet we could.
yes, I'd be happy to send them as a PDF. Yep. Thank you. So I'm going to walk through those sort of 3 legs of the stool and talk about the work that our office is currently doing. So around reducing emissions, mitigation work, I just want to lead with that our office over the last few years, as you all struggle and grapple with policy implications and decisions as a legislature or around rules, around what recommendations go into the climate action plan, our office has really found that we should and will continue to be able to support asking for, requesting funding, finding grant funding to support technical analyses, which we really feel are foundational to good policy. We're currently advancing the development of the climate policy study, which was required through the T-bill last year. The T-bill required that VTrans and ANR work together and that we use some of our climate pollution reduction grant funds to analyze the impacts and benefits around joining a cap and invest program. That technical report is currently being vetted and has been handed off to the Treasurer's office. And the Treasurer's office is tasked with making a recommendation to the legislature by February 15th about how to proceed with that. So that's been policy work that we've been leading with VTrans and has been collaborated on with the Technical Advisory Committee that was also named into the T-bill, which includes Jared Duval and 2 other climate counselors, Joey Miller and Richard Cowart. So we've been coordinating closely with them on the assumptions and questions that go into that policy. We also develop routinely and update the business as usual model, which looks at where we are with our emissions and projects forward based on current policies, how many emissions reductions we expect from a point in time to another point in time. And then build scenarios around how we would close that gap in order to meet the emissions reductions as required by the Global Warming Solutions Act. We have done the business as usual model 3 times. We are currently updating it right now and expect to have a draft of the business as usual model by March to inform our technical assistance and outreach for the update to the climate action plan, and plan to present the assumptions and have that discussing debate about the BAU with the Science and Data Subcommittee later in February before we move forward with developing it fully. The programmatic work has been smaller in our office, as I've alluded, like we have excellent agencies between VTrans and Public Service Department really leading on energy policy and transportation work, but there are distinct roles that our agency can fill. We advance any of the rulemaking that comes out of a climate action plan. As you all probably know, the GWSA gives the authority to the council to recommend rules to meet our emissions reductions, and ANR is the agency obligated to advancing those rules on a strict timeline. So any rules proposed in the second iteration of the climate action plan, as of this July 1st, we would have to promulgate by July 1st, 2026. The only rules that came out of the first climate action plan largely built on rules that our agency had already had a history of advancing. We were already part of Advanced Clean Cars 1 and Advanced Clean Cars 2 built upon that regulation to require clean vehicles in the light duty fleet to increasingly be delivered as EVs, phasing out new internal combustion vehicles by 2035. That doesn't mean can't still buy an internal combustion engine vehicle based on used vehicles and moving around, but new vehicles after 2035 will be electric vehicles, clean vehicles. And then advanced clean trucks is a new regulation that is much more complicated and would take a whole presentation for me to explain, but it doesn't phase out all internal combustion engine vehicles. It phases up percentages of delivery based on different classes where the technology is. And the expectation is that over time, by driving that more clean vehicles and that those specific moderate and heavy duty classes will be delivered. We also manage refrigerant management out of our office. We have a program with VEIC to track refrigerant leaks in grocery stores. Those have very high global warming potential and make up a large portion of our non-energy sector. And then this year, with one-time funding in the Climate Action Office, we've provided a bridge to CAP agencies to support energy navigators. You all, as legislators, supported using ARPA dollars, American Recovery Act dollars, to support the development of energy navigators at CAP agencies to meet with financial coaching and bridge the gap of the challenges for low-income Vermonters to access what is often free money to make fuel switching or weatherization, but is just hard for people to navigate. Energy navigators are supposed to meet them where they are and really do all of the lifting for them. That money, the ARPA money, ran out at the end of calendar year 24. We were able to provide bridge funding through the end of the fiscal year so that folks wouldn't lose their jobs in hope of finding more funding for energy navigators. Our office is leading the development of the resilience and implementation strategy, which was a strategy development launched out of the governor's office and treasurer's office a year ago. This has been a heavy lift for our resilience and adaptation staff, first completing an opportunity assessment, which attempted to inventory every program, grant, plan, action within state government across all agencies that either have a primary purpose or a secondary purpose of addressing resilience and adaptation, so that we could say what government is doing and identify where those gaps are to prioritize, and then work very closely with the treasurer's office to align financing strategies as well as new funding recommendations. That will be done July 1st. You all also signaled to the resilience implementation strategy as the place where funding would someday go from the Climate Superfund Act. This is the plan where the money would come when it comes someday.
There we go.
And then finally and quickly, I spoke to this already, but we are produced the annual greenhouse gas inventory. The latest greenhouse gas inventory was for 2021. That data lags for us in the natural and working land sector largely. That stops us from being able to produce that aligned with calendar year. That doesn't, we have worked really hard over the last few years to use less data sets and more Vermont data. And so even though the annual greenhouse gas inventory won't be produced for 2024, which if you don't know is I know very well is the first statutory emissions reduction year, we won't know officially for 2 years if we've met that target, but we'll have a very good idea by March of this year because we'll know the two largest sectors, fossil fuel reporting for last year for the RCI, the home heating sector, and the transportation sector. So,
Yeah.
I'll find. Let me wrap up if you don't mind, and then I'll be all set. And then the measuring and assessing progress tool I spoke to earlier, and I think what's really valuable about this tool is the fact that we're thinking about not only emissions reductions, but how our office can track meaningfully resilience and adaptation, which is something that many states are struggling with what the right metrics are right now to move the needle on. Finally, community engagement. I'll just say again that this has been something that we've really are pioneering out of our office. We have both dedicated staff as well as a contract in our base funded budget in the climate office. We have additional capacity to support facilitation services as well as public meetings, focus groups, stipends, and have been really trying to build relationships with community-based organizations and cultural brokers to meet people where they are and be able to work through trusted partners to access clients and viewpoints that have traditionally not been at the table. And the final one, which is the handoff to Mr. Duval, is that we are also the administrative support, our office for the Climate Council. And that means that we support all of the meetings that they have. We work closely with a contractor to develop agendas. The steering committee, which Jared sits on, thinks about process and planning for the council meetings, as well as guidance for the committees. Our office is there at all of those meetings and helping to support those conversations as well. We manage contractual support to ensure the work moves forward, both technical and, as I said, facilitation services. And right now that work is moving in earnest because the work has handed up from the subcommittees to the Climate Council to really think about what that next climate action plan is going to look like, what those recommendations are, and it's statutorily required by July 1st of this year.
Thank you. Rep. Sibilia, you had a question and then we'll.
Yeah, just going back to the emissions. Yeah, that one. And I apologize. This was a question I had yesterday in committee. But there is the tiniest little inventory there for the fossil fuel industry, which, what is that measuring? I think
You got good eyes.
Yeah, please, Jared.
It's confusing because what it really refers to is methane that would be released from fossil gas or natural gas utility infrastructure. So it's leaks in the pipeline system. It's not like, fossil fuel emissions from gas, diesel, even from the combustion of natural gas. It's a weird name, but it's fossil fuel industry, but it's just leaks from the gas pipeline system.
Okay. I would have suggested had I gotten that answer yesterday. That is not, maybe not the best.
Yes.
I took it right from our inventory, but we'll note that. And then for folks who don't know, on the right side of this, these are our statutorily required emission reduction targets that I just mentioned. 26% below 2005 levels, which we were required to hit by January 1st of this year, and then 40% below 1990 levels by January 1st of 2030. I think, it's come into focus. We would talk about them for 2025 and 2030, but the hard date of the way the GWSA was written really reflects that the emissions reductions years are actually 24 and 29. And so a little confusing because in the Paris Climate Agreement, it says 2025, 2030, but that hard date, the way we have interpreted it and agree with the Climate Council, is that it's the 2024 and 29 inventory will be the inventories that judge whether or not we met the target.
If I may, for just a sec.
Yeah.
There was a question earlier about what does smoothing the curve mean when we talk about that? There's some discussion of drawing kind of a straight line from here to here. You see
Yes.
goes above that and that, so it would allow us higher emissions in 2025 and 2030, and as long as we get to the 2050 target. Just for people who are confused by that.
Point. Okay. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming and presenting to us.
Thank you, Jane, for all the work that you do.
Yeah.
It's really very critical.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, we're your team. We want to support your office as much as possible. So please don't, the door is open both directions. I'll say that, definitely. And then Jared Duval, you're a reoccurring character at the Caucus meeting. What hat are you wearing today?
I was invited to join as a member of the Climate Council. So I will just add a little bit to what Jane said, and thanks for that great presentation, Jane. So to be clear, for those I don't know, my name is Jared Duval. I was appointed to the Vermont Climate Council. There's 23 different seats. There's other councilors in the room. I see Peter Sterling back there, who is a member of the council as well. And Jane, although she's not an official member of the council, is invaluable in terms of all the support that she provides to the council, along with other Climate Action Office staff. But I was appointed to this seat to provide expertise in energy and data analysis. I think that's one of the really valuable parts of the way that the Global Warming Solutions Act is written, is that when it created the Climate Council, 23 members with different experience, expertise. So we have that diversity of perspective in terms of trying to craft climate action plan that reflects and works for Vermont. So I was just going to do a really brief overview of the council and like where we're at, and then just open it up to questions. So I don't have a lot prepared. So there are 23 members. There are 5 subcommittees of the council. They have all been working to draft recommendations that have been lifted up to the Climate Council. We just met on Monday as a council and approved a report to the legislature that was sent via the Climate Action Office. So I know that I don't know every committee that was sent to, but clearly the committees of jurisdiction, I know it went to Senate Natural Resources and Energy and House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. But folks who are interested in that report who may not have received it, I know that that's available now, and the council has just approved it. But those 5 subcommittees of the council, we have the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee, which is a long, confusing name for reducing climate pollution. How do we actually reduce emissions? Rural resilience and adaptation subcommittee, agriculture and ecosystem subcommittee, just transition subcommittee, and the science and data subcommittee. So my role in the council, I'm just one of the 23. I have a hand in a few of those different committees. I chair the science and data subcommittee, serve on the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee, and serve on the council's steering committee. And so just want to say that we generally only speak as a one counselor. I think I can fairly say on behalf of the council that we very much welcome the feedback on the report, requests for engagement. We do have a process. We work with the Climate Action Plan in terms of requests for testimony, depending on what the topic is. Is it something that's best addressed by the chair or co-chairs of cross-sector mitigation or resilience and adaptation or something, whatever it is. But we very much want to be available. You know, we're in this interesting in-between space right now where the first climate action plan was written and approved December 1st of 2021. Then the revised updated climate action plan is due July 1st of this year. And so we have just had surfaced the long number of total recommendations and a smaller number of priority recommendations to go into the updated climate action plan. And those are going to be, we're increasing the frequency and the length of our climate council meetings to be able to do that deliberation. And, you know, we look forward to sharing that work with you as it develops. I do think, you know, there's been some talk of the challenging timing of the draft plan coming out after the session has ended. But we'll do the best that we can to be in communication and deliberation with each other. I don't think there's.
Is there anything, you know, as legislators who are hearing from constituents, obviously we're all here because we have constituents who are very active on this topic. And we have districts that want to see responses to climate change. Do you feel at this moment that we're going to be likely to hit our Global Warming Solutions Act requirements and that the Climate Council is supported in the way that it needs to be? Or is that something that we should be addressing as a legislature this session?
I'm sure there's different opinions on that. Just speaking individually, I mean, I think there's one area where I think there's broad agreement among everybody who has modeled and looked at that, and that is that we are not on track to meet the 2030 or the January 1st, 2030 emissions reduction obligation in the law. Where the amount of activity that we would need to see in terms of energy efficiency, transitioning to less polluting energy equipment and choices, it's not happening at the pace and scale that would be necessary to meet that 2030 target. There is disagreement, or there has been in the past. We'll see with the updated modeling what it says. There has been disagreement about whether or not we are on track, or now we're speaking retroactively, right? Whether the future data will show that we met the first greenhouse gas reduction requirement of the GWSA as of January 1st. I think it's very unlikely, and I have significant concerns that we will see. And as Jane said, you know, the tax department and joint fiscal office will make available total fuels sales data that will allow us to look at total sales of gasoline, diesel, fuel oil, propane, fossil gas. And, you know, that's 70+% of our statewide emissions. So we'll have a good early check in March, even if, totally agree with Jane, the full inventory wouldn't be available till later, but we'll have a sense sooner rather than later about, you know, whether it's mathematically possible that we did, given that vast bulk of emissions that we'll know.
Okay.
And on the question of engaging with Vermonters and constituents, Jane is actually better positioned to speak to this than I am, but because she helps coordinate it. But we have a very robust public engagement process that has been evolving based on public feedback. But, you know, any comments that are received by email into the system that are sent to the Climate Council via the Climate Action Office, those are now shared during the meetings. We have public comment sessions during every meeting. The Climate Action Office helps organize with paid contractors events, both in person and virtual, to seek feedback. And that'll be a big part. Kind of the process now is we're trying to finalize our draft recommendations and prioritization and some of the chapters of the climate action plan by March, so that that draft can then be shared for public comment before it would go to kind of a final writing and approval in the June period.
So Rep. Burke has a question, and then it's almost 12:50, so maybe we do like one more burning question and then we're gonna wrap up. So.
Well, it's sort of a comment. I think it's really important for us as a climate caucus to stand firm on not, there've been some noises about cutting back on the goals and going a little slower and things like that. And I think it's really important that I was thinking about this today. It's like, well, you might say your goal is to exercise every day, but if you don't exercise every day, it doesn't mean that you should stop exercising. You know, so
No, it's back on track.
so, anyway, I think that, and also I think that we need to frame all these things that we're doing in terms of affordability. You know, if we can have vehicles, then people can get into more affordable transportation, heating, et cetera. So I think that lens in terms of talking to constituents or people who are concerned about, you know, what we're doing, I think that's just really important.
May I just tag on to that comment, Molly, because I think Jimmy Carter's death and the memorial services and all the obituaries and all the wonderful reminders of what an extraordinary visionary he was. And just think of if we had actually enacted all the things that his administration had proposed. And that is what's at stake. I mean, quite honestly, if we don't keep our toes to the fire, we're
We're gonna be on fire.
we're already on fire, as LA is showing us, sadly, yet another California reminder. But I just think that we've had such a strong reminder that action is now, and it has to be now. And sadly, there wasn't the political will to do it in the 70s, but we have it now, and we need to harness it and move forward.
Representative Pash, do you?
Yeah, just a quick question. The Climate Council, it's all open. We see everything, which is, what we need. And I can appreciate that. I just wonder if the Climate Action Office, obviously you're feeding up into the BAA, the budget and all the organizations through your secretary. Are you putting out public information, or is what you're saying, here's what we need to do, going through the administration coming out?
Oh,
we put forward the climate spending, if that's what you're talking about, and where we're going. That's all a public document. The process around recommendations to the secretary that goes to the governor is no different than any
Any other.
agency. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
thank you. And thank you, everybody, for our first meeting, and we'll be back. I want to, but there's this dang committee that's in there right now, so.
Yeah, this works.
So we'll be back here. And if there was any advocates you wanted to talk to, grab them. And then tonight we have at Hugo's Bar and Grill at 4:30, there is an environmental common agenda gathering. So think about that if you want a little.